are on chapter 3 of 1 Samuel, learning about God and his ways and his heart, focusing on clinging to God. In chapter 1, the focus was on Hannah and how she poured out her soul to the Lord and asked him for a son. God answered her prayers and she bore Samuel. Samuel was dedicated to a life of service to God. And so at the end of chapter 1, Hannah and her husband Elkanah took him to the temple where he would live and serve. In chapter 2, we rejoiced with Hannah through her prayer. Then the focus moved to Eli and his worthless sons. That's the Bible's description. Now in chapter 3, the spotlight is on the boy Samuel. This book of the Bible is called 1 Samuel, and we're about to see Samuel move into the calling that God had for him. So we're reading in 1 Samuel chapter 3, starting in verse 1, and I'm reading from the New American Standard Version, NASB. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord before Eli. And word from the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were infrequent. God had been speaking all the time through Moses, through Joshua, but in the period of the Judges, which this still is, sin was so rampant, people had turned to their own way, and a word from the Lord was rare. Continuing in verse 2, it happened at that time as Eli was lying down in his place. Now his eyesight had begun to grow dim, and he could not see well. And the lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, that the Lord called Samuel. And he said, "Here I am." Then he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call. Lie down again." So he went and lay down. The Lord called yet again, "Samuel." So Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he answered, "I did not call, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, nor had the word of the Lord yet been revealed to him. I love this for so many reasons. We're talking about clinging to God and choosing a lifestyle of intimacy with God. This is the God side of intimacy. He's the one who initiates always. Here he has a specific purpose for Samuel, a specific calling. And that's the case for all of us who are believers in Christ. Here we see God literally calling Samuel by name. Samuel hears a voice and he responds. He calls us as well by his Spirit. Before we knew him, he knew us, and he had his mind set on us. When we think of intimacy with God, we often think that we're the ones who are trying to get to God, hoping it'll work, hoping he will receive us. God is the one who had you in mind for intimacy, for relationship, before time began. And he put everything in place for you to be intimate with him through Jesus, his son. He's the one who wants you to cling to him, to abide in him. Just come. Continuing, verse 8. So the Lord called Samuel again for the third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli discerned that the Lord was calling the boy. And Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and it shall be, if he calls you, that you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Then the Lord came and stood and called as at other times, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, speak, for your servant is listening. This is the heart posture of a clinger. If we're going to be clinging to God, we have to be listening to God. In Deuteronomy 13:4, which is where we find the words cling to him, it also says, listen to his voice. The more we are in the word, the more we are filled with the word, we will hear God's voice in all kinds of situations and won't always be happy about it. You might be in the middle of a conversation and hear God say, where there are many words, transgression is unavoidable, but he who restrains his lips is wise. That's God speaking. Do we listen? Listening to God means also having a heart to obey God. Continuing verse 11, the Lord said to Samuel, behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel at which both ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. In that day, I will carry out against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house, from beginning to end. For I have told him that I am about to judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knew, because his sons brought a curse on themselves, and he did not rebuke them. Therefore, I have sworn to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever. So Samuel lay down until morning. Then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord. But Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. You can just see Samuel like, Lord, why did you lay this on me? What am I supposed to do with this? But there's a reason God brought him this word. God is establishing his call on Samuel's life. Continuing verse 16, then Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. And he said, here I am. He said, what is the word that he spoke to you? Please do not hide it from me. May God do so to you and more also if you hide anything from me of all the words that he spoke to you. So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And he, Eli, said, it is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. So this is now the second time Eli has gotten a word of judgment from the Lord. The first time was in chapter 2 when God sent someone to him, and now he's getting it from Samuel. So Eli is resigned at this point. He's accepted that this is God's judgment, and he didn't deny it. He didn't pass the blame. Verse 19, I love this verse. Thus Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fail. This was the sign of a true prophet. If a so-called prophet said one thing and it didn't come to pass, he was not a real prophet. Deuteronomy 18:20 through 22 speaks to this. But the prophet who speaks a word presumptuously in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or which he speaks in the name of other gods, that prophet shall die. You may say in your heart, how will we know the word which the Lord has not spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the thing does not come about or come true, that is the thing which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You shall not be afraid of him, because he's not from God. No such thing as, oops, got that one wrong. No, you're a false prophet. And God considered that to be so serious that he commanded the person be put to death. Samuel was from God. Not one word failed. And the people knew what that meant. Verse 20, all Israel from Dan even to Beersheba knew that Samuel was confirmed as a prophet of the Lord. And the last verse in the chapter, and the Lord appeared again at Shiloh, because the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord. Remember, the very first verse said a word from the Lord was rare in these days. Now, in the last verse, the Lord appears again through Samuel. Samuel will minister as a strong prophet of God. Can we just recall that this was the boy Hannah prayed for when she poured out her soul to the Lord? The Lord knew his plans for Samuel, and he also knew he would use the prayers of a faithful woman and record them as an example to us. Clinging to God means knowing the power of prayer and choosing a lifestyle of prayer. Don't discount what God is able to do through your prayers. He is able to impact not only your own life, but the lives of others. Maybe even a nation like Hannah and Samuel. Let's have hearts that pray and hearts that listen to the Lord. And we are grateful that just as the Lord was with Samuel, he is with us.